7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Invite everybody to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kathy, would you call the roll, please?
Jim Dombeck.
Here.
Steve Nelson.
Here.
James Shiloh.
Here.
Julene Davy. Here. Jeff Jacobson.
Here.
Eric Jones.
Present.
Kristen Wren. Here. Quorum's present.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda as proposed? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Davy.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Wren.
Yes.
Shiloh.
Yes.
Dombeck.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Audience to visitors. Is there anyone in the audience this evening that would like to address the board?
It's so lonely.
No? Okay. Move on to communications, correspondence, informational items. Letters and newsletters. There were some. There were many. FOIA requests. There were quite a few of those, too. Have all of them been answered? Yeah. There's one that's still pending, right? I mean, we requested an extension, yeah. Committee reports?
No planning and zoning this month.
Any other committee reports?
Yes, I'm super excited to be able to talk in this section.
All right. I was hoping you would.
Citizens Advisory Committee got off the ground last Thursday. So we met for the first time. We've got a good group, myself, Julene, Steve, and we've got a good group of parents with wide ranges of children at every school in the district. Families that are, just a couple kids or multiple kids, or so just a good wide variety of group. I think that our first meeting was more just to kind of get it off the ground, get to know each other, get our feet planted with the committee, and then obviously then we did start discussion towards the end as well, just kind of talking about looking ahead. I mean, we spend a lot of our time as the board, and obviously a lot of parent feedback in regards to the current situation we're in with our schooling. We were kind of looking forward of, once we're back to a full-time, everyone's in the building, what types of things do we want to continue to see that maybe we've uncovered throughout this e-learning. So we talked a little bit about that, and like I said, just kind of getting our feet wet with the committee and getting our feet wet with everybody there, and I think everything went pretty well. And Julian, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, yes, it was very nice to see that several of them were former students, so nice to know that you're the oldest person in the group. But it was great. It was good. Good meeting.
Will you meet once a month?
We said quarterly right now, but obviously room for expansion of that. I know we all kind of committed to quarterly, but then, as things happen, probably I could see us definitely getting to a monthly or bi-monthly or something like that.
Any other committee reports? Okay, we'll move on then. Superintendent's report.
Good evening. Several things in the superintendent's report, but I'll start with some of the things that we talk about every meeting. Our mission, empowering all learners to succeed in their world. Our vision, to provide an ideal learning experience where students and staff are engaged and want to come back the next day. Our core values, honesty, trustworthiness, integrity, equality, empathy, respect, citizenship, digital citizenship, responsibility, and collaboration. And the questions that our professional learning communities ask and discuss: what do we want students to know and learn? What do students want to know and learn? How will we know if they've learned it? What will we do if they don't learn it? And what do we do if they already know it? And to start the superintendent's portion of the meeting, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Janish, our principal at North Grove. Periodically, we feature schools, and typically we would be in those buildings, but for a variety of reasons, that's not possible. So we'd still like to stick with that, talking about each school individually, and Mr. Janish is here tonight, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you. Good evening to the board. Thank you for the invite. I feel a little bit lonely tonight. I'm used to my partners here as well, so they offered to come and support, but I said, no, we're good. You guys take the night off. So that we've all continued to see each other on a daily basis, so this is different to be here just on my own. So quick update here on what we've been doing at North Grove, but obviously a lot of these topics are not just North Grove specific, but instead they would actually be elementary wide. So I will be speaking to some of the things we're doing at North Grove, but a lot of these things will apply to all the elementary buildings. All right, so first thing, a quick update on remote learning. So I think when we started remote learning, it was really more about, can we even function in this type of an environment with kids the age that we were educating? And I'm very pleased to say within the last few weeks, I feel like the things we have been focusing on is more program enhancements for kids, because the teachers have done an amazing job with developing the remote learning plans. So a few of the things we're going to give updates on tonight are really kind of enhancements. So the first one, we worked hard at all the buildings to develop an engagement referral process, so that if a student was not engaged, we would have a way that they could be referred for support, and then we would have an ability to kind of provide a couple tiers of support. So we're currently monitoring attendance, synchronous engagement during those times that the classroom teacher is live, and then work completion. And so if a teacher is concerned about a student in any of those areas, they can be referred, and then we would respond. We've done things such as, simple things such as emails and phone calls to connect, but we've also done visits outside of the school where the parents come in with a Chromebook and we kind of walk them through all the components. Sometimes it's just a little bit of technology training that's needed. Sometimes it's a reminder of expectations for students. We've also done some home visits with some of our social workers and special education staff. And even some more creative things, which I don't want to go into all the specifics on because they are very family specific. So we've helped out with hotspots, other items that we need. Anything we can do to try and close that gap for engagement, we've been doing that. So that was a success. We've also figured out the system that we're using to check out books from the libraries. So elementary students can now check out books from their libraries, and then the books just go in the bags for supply pickup, and then they return them at the next supply pickup. We've also been working on different fun activities. So one of the things that the elementary buildings are planning is the students are dressing up in their Halloween costumes for the pickup that will take place during the week of October 30th. So that will be kind of a fun thing. That's a tradition that happens at the elementary schools that we were going to miss this year. So we're happy to do that, and our staff will get a chance to participate in that as well. One of the things that we started up at North Grove is we had this committee called HUGS, which stands for Helping Us Get Social. And it was a group that we needed a lot when the building first opened, but we haven't needed it as much the last few years. But we did bring that back this year, because one of the things we've noticed is when teachers are teaching in their rooms, you kind of start to feel yourself being pretty isolated. You're in your room all day long, you're teaching, you're meeting with those small groups, and then it's hard because maybe your short break time does not align to anyone else's. And so one of the things we had to do is make an effort to make sure staff had a chance to see each other. And then also, we do need to take care of our staff right now. As we all know, this has been a big change. And so this was an effort that we made to try and take care of staff. So 2 weeks ago, we did a wellness walk. These are activities like at the end of the day on Friday. Last week, we had one of our new teachers run a yoga session. And then this week, the staff will actually have an opportunity to decorate pumpkins that then we'll use to decorate the front lawn for that supply pickup that all the students are coming dressed to. So again, trying to bring a little pumpkin fest flair still to the school district during that week as well. So I think those will be some fun things. Of course, we're continuing all the normal daily tasks. So we still get calls for technology support daily. We are still monitoring our COVID protocol with different students and staff as needed. And then, of course, our planning for in-person learning has taken over the bulk of many of our hours right now during the school day as well. Oh, that's just a picture of Mrs. Berry on the right, and I think she has on her goggles for science, so that's a nice picture that we grabbed for her while she was doing her remote learning. All right, so the other thing we've been able to do is bring back some student activities. So the picture on the right is actually our Early Act meeting that took place yesterday. So at North Grove, we were able to start up our Early Act Club, which is the extension of the local Rotary Club. So we had 48 fifth graders sign up for the club this year, and we were able to host our first meeting yesterday. So we started in a big group, and then we broke out into breakout groups to work on the different activities for the month. So that was nice. We also brought back our Bold Awards. So our Bold Awards are the tickets that kids earn during the school day for doing something positive around the school, and then the ticket goes in the bucket, and then we draw a winner, and typically they get to come down to my office, we play a game, and they get a small prize. And so we just had to figure out how to do that remotely. So the teachers are now giving out Bold Awards during their online sessions. They're drawing their winners on Wednesday. I announce them during announcements on Thursday, and then the kids know to join me at the end of the day on Friday in my Google Classroom, and I play a game with them, and then they get a prize that goes home again in their supply bag. So again, just trying to find ways to do the things we normally do. They just look a little bit different right now. The Battle of the Books team started back up. They actually have their first practice tomorrow after school. Yearbook design cover is a yearly competition that we do where our students actually design the cover of our yearbook. So those entries are due on Friday of this week, and we're going through our normal processes on that. The students actually get to vote for the winning yearbook cover. So typically they would do that on election day. That is one of the things we do yearly on election day. So this year we'll have a Google form that will go out, and the students will still get to select the cover for their yearbook this year, and they'll get to do that right around election day. Then the district music departments have been working very hard. I believe instrument pickup is later this week for band. I know orchestra is off and running as well. And so that's nice to bring back some of those offerings for the students. And then we actually held our PTO book fair this past week as well. So that was a nice thing we were able to offer for families who might need to get books in their home right now. All right, our parents have been fantastic. I know when Mrs. Crawford presented a couple weeks ago, she shared the big banner that was at South Prairie, and here's just an example at North Grove. On the right, we've got a group of North Grove students who showed up with their parents, and they chalked the front entrances to the school where the teachers come in, so just some very positive messages there. They also provided drinks and snacks to the staff as well. It was just a very kind gesture, and one that went a long way with our staff. I know they really appreciated that. Also wanted to highlight Oleg Clark here. Oleg is a senior at Sycamore High School. He began his Eagle Scout project in the spring before we went on leave. And we had met several times about putting together a sensory table, which you can see there to the right. And, he was able to work on the project while we were out. We stayed in communication during the summer, and then he was finally able to bring the table to North Grove a couple of weeks ago, which was fantastic. Obviously, not able to use it at this time, but once we are, that will go probably in our library, and that will be something our kids will be very excited about. So Oleg did a great job with that. Wanted to share a few pictures from remote learning. The one on the left is Mr. Martin, our art teacher. As you can see, he has made his own tripod out of 2 chairs, 2 buckets, and what looks like a mini stand. So we appreciate the creativity from our staff. And then on the right, you see Mrs. Hardesty, one of our kindergarten teachers. A couple more here. The one on the left is Mrs. Tucker, one of our 4th grade teachers. She's actually using part of that new technology setup that we have talked to the board about for what we're moving into. So you can see there, she has the external webcam, and she's actually teaching right there at the board, and then the students are able to watch her that way. And then on the right, you have Mrs. Ricker, one of our special education teachers, holding a small group meeting. And then a few more here. So on the far left there, that's Mrs. Zimmerman. She's one of our non-certified staff members. So one of the challenges we had at the building was finding nooks and crannies where we could have non-certified staff members go because they don't have their own space. But we had to create their own space because they're meeting with groups all day long as well. They have done a great job of supporting our special education students. So that's Mrs. Zimmerman's workspace as she hosts her Google Meets throughout the day. And then in the middle, you have Mrs. Wheeler, one of our 3rd grade teachers. And then on the right, that is Mrs. Doty, and she's actually teaching the kindergartners the different buttons on the Google Meet. So you can kind of see the little stick she's holding up right now, which I believe is the mute button. And so I like that picture a lot. We want to make sure that whenever we do these building updates that we give ample credit to our staff. They have been amazing. And I think the last line there is the one I want to jump to first, which is they're lifelong learners. We have asked them to take the craft that they know and they have polished and completely learn it a different way. And they've done an amazing job. Every single time we have a conversation about something we might need to improve, they come up with ways to improve it. And I'll give you an example of that. I had some feedback from some parents that they just said, you know, either the child is going to daycare or they're working during the day and their child's on their own for remote learning, and then they come home and then they're trying to get up to speed with what they've missed all day for remote learning. And they said, if there was just one place to go to where I could just see like, okay, here are the assignments, what am I missing, what do I need to do? So I don't have to navigate through the whole classroom. So I brought that to the leadership team, we talked about that, and later that afternoon, all of our teams had responded to parents with, hey, here is the one-stop shop that you can go to find assignments. And either they created a new slide or they showed them where that place was in their Google Classroom. So just that responsiveness, I so appreciate, because obviously when those concerns come forward, we want to make sure that we can address those. And you know, we're all new to this, so we're just trying to improve things as quickly as possible. The two pictures you see here, those are pictures from supply pickup. So the picture on the right is Mrs. May. She's one of our third grade teachers. You can see all the piles on the desks there. That's all the copies and all the materials. There's actually a bag there from the Farm Bureau as well that's on the floor there that's all about pumpkins. And then on the left, that's Mrs. Hardesty, one of our kindergarten teachers at supply pickup today. And those are the end results of what supply pickup looks like, those big grocery bags. And every grade it looks a little different, but the amount of work that goes into prepping materials 2 weeks in advance for our elementary students is incredible. And so they've just done a great job with that. Other discussions our staff continues to have is the best way to assess students remotely. That has certainly been something that has generated a lot of discussion in terms of best practices. And then also engagement and instructional practices. As you can imagine, we are constantly discussing different ways to engage students and what instructional practices are working best while remote. And of course, now we are starting to transition into building preparations for coming back to school. So here's just a bulletin board that went up at North Grove with all the Bitmojis welcoming back the students. So, you know, well, I would say one of the things that has been very interesting over the past couple of weeks is all of the normal preparation that goes into the start of the school year really went on pause, you know, a couple weeks before the school year started. So those tasks really didn't get finished because everybody went into different directions with remote learning. And so now it is like we're starting the school year again, but in October. And so the amount of work that has to be done to the physical structure of the schools, it's a lot, to the individual classrooms and to the building as a whole. So a lot of preparation that has to be done for that. Here are some of the visual spacing reminders that have been put around the building by the communications department, just reminding kids and showing kids what that 6 feet of social distancing looks like. And then of course the other one there is the lunch tables. You can see how they're marked to space the students out as well. We're also working on that technology transition, and so on the right you see what's outside of many of the teachers' classrooms now, which is that taller kind of standing desk along with the dual monitors and some of the cords. So we kind of have a staging area right now that as all the tech equipment comes in, it's being staged there, and when it's ready, then we'll make the swap, because one of the things we can't do is we can't shut the teacher's workstation down while we're transitioning. This has to be a very fluid process of they're functioning, they're teaching, okay, we're gonna come in, switch your tech out, and within an hour, you're able to go back to teaching. So we can't have a downtime there whatsoever. So we're staging everything outside of the rooms, and then we're doing the quick switch. So on the left, you see the picture of what that final setup is gonna look like with the TV, the external webcam and mic, and then of course the dual monitors with the document camera. So that's the picture on the left is what we're going for. The picture on the right is where we're at right now. A lot of work to coordinate the transition of the technology. Other visual reminders are going up around the building. So here's just another bulletin board just reminding students of those safety measures in terms of staying the 6 feet of social distancing, washing hands, and wearing their masks. And then those are pictures of our staff modeling all of those things. And then I just wanted to list a small list of what some of the elementary schools, what we're working on right now as we are preparing for this return to school on November 4th. So the first, designation changes. They're due tomorrow. We've all sent reminders out to our parents along with a little video reminder of some important things they may need to know. Right now, the elementary schools have about 120 designation changes that we've received, and 80% of those are switching to hybrid from remote, which is kind of what we had anticipated. We are working on furniture realignment. So one of the things we need to do now is we need to, again, get those desk space back out to that 6 feet of distance. We are also having to shuffle furniture around. We needed kind of that standing desk in the front for the teachers. And so there's been a lot of furniture realignment around the buildings. And then, of course, technology transition, which we've already talked about. We are still working through all of those in-person logistics. Supplies has been one of those larger discussions. So we know that we've sent a ton of supplies home with students. They still need those in their home for the days when they're hybrid at remote. But then we also need those supplies in the classroom for the days they're there. So we're trying to figure out exactly what supplies we need to have 2 sets of and what supplies the students will be transporting back and forth with them every day. We can't have students carrying totes, back and forth every day. So we do need to kind of pare that down. Of course, lunch, recess, arrival, dismissal, and all safety protocols. Those are all the things we are still finalizing. Hiring is something that we're all in the midst of doing, is trying to finalize those staffing holes that we have. The isolation spaces, we've met with Mr. Ekstrom. He's walked through those spaces with us, and some of those areas are getting updates at this time. We're also working on a transitional week for students and what that's going to look like. We're also working on what in-person instructional planning should be looking like, building schedules and support. So we've started to build the framework, and one of the things we noticed right away that's very different from a normal year is to do lunch the right way with the appropriate time in between to clean. Our lunch times have really been extended because we lose about 40 minutes during our day just putting the gap in between that we need to clean it and to let it dry. And so that is extending the lunch times, which then makes creating the building schedule along with support services just a little bit more challenging. So we've been meeting with staff this week to start to finalize some of that, and we will have that ready for next week. And then, of course, PD and transitional support for our staff. Again, we've talked about this with the board on a few occasions. We just need to make sure that the staff is ready for yet another transition or another pivot as we get ready for the in-person learning with the parallel plan coming up here in just a few short weeks. So there's the update from North Grove and really kind of all the elementary schools with what we've been working on. Again, I don't think we can thank our staff enough for everything that they've done. And the support from families just kind of understanding. And I think everybody's excited about the opportunity, whether you're taking the opportunity or not. It's nice now that families get to have a choice, hopefully, coming up here on November 4th. Can answer any questions you might have.
Hey, Ryan, I just want to congratulate you with a great presentation to us tonight. As a board member, it's always kind of the unknown that's scary. I think not just as a board member, but as a person in general. It's really neat to see all that hard work come together, and I think your slideshow really did a nice job showing your staff, how that's evolved, the classroom. Almost looks like small studios, like a TV studio, which is really unbelievable that you're able to pull that together. And more importantly for me, it's nice to see the students and to see how they're adjusting as well. I know it's difficult for the parents as well, but staff in action, and I think that's, for me personally, what I've been missing the last few months is just seeing all that come together and seeing how all that works. So thank you again for that great presentation tonight.
Yeah, and I know we talked about it during the board retreat a little bit. Was that a week ago or 2 weeks ago now? Was that last week?
That was last week.
Wow, okay, all right, last week. I think one of the things, hopefully, when all of this does settle down a bit, we can all kind of step back and look at what was accomplished over really 2 months. I mean, it is remarkable what we were able to create in terms of creating a remote learning environment for our families. So I certainly know we have room for improvement and things we would all want to tweak and change, but this was an amazing accomplishment by our staff to get this to the position that it's in right now. So they deserve a ton of credit for that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it gives us a real concrete example of just how much work is really being done. I mean, it's one thing to sit up here and theorize and to think this through and to kind of put, at least the bones together, but it's a whole different thing to see how much work that imposes on other people in the district, primarily our teachers and our staff. So I for one was a little surprised by some of the necessary effort that I really didn't think was going to be there. So I mean, there's there's a lot more there than what I had anticipated initially. So thank you for bringing that to light. And hopefully that comes to light not just for the board, but for everybody that's listening to this broadcast and everybody that's out here. And thanks to you and thanks to the other principals and thanks to the staff and thanks to all of our teachers who are on the front lines every day. You can see it in these slides and in this presentation. They're really doing phenomenal work, and it's appreciated. We really appreciate it. We'd be lost without them. So appreciate the effort, and I think it's going to pay off in the long run. I think it's going to be better for everybody all around. So I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, but I'm also very appreciative of the work that's been done. A lot of work.
Thank you.
So thank you for bringing that to light for us.
Yep, as we've always expected from you and your team, and you guys have always delivered, a big kudos to you and all of the staff, not just at North Grove, but at the rest of the sites in the district for the incredible amount of work that's been done the last couple of months to make this as good as it can be. But I did want to highlight and thank you for your attention to the critical role that the elementary schools in particular are going to play in teaching that good hygiene that is going to be so important for not only a successful return to learn, but for us as a society to continue to make progress against the coronavirus and this COVID-19 outbreak. Obviously, there's been feedback about the numbers starting to pick up in Region 1, and we're starting to see some of that in DeKalb, but I don't want it to be lost that opening the schools isn't necessarily going to make that worse, because it is going to provide an opportunity for us to be hyper-focused and to make sure that all of the youth in Sycamore is getting that attention on a near daily basis to teach them those essential skills to help us keep this from getting much worse. So thank you for all the work you did prepping the school for that.
It'll definitely be a part of that transition process. We've identified the number of times kids will need to wash their hands, specifically, and it's quite a few. And so that will be reminders that they get constantly. And so we do know that our ability to be able to maintain what we're doing is directly connected to the ability of the students to practice those safety practices. So yeah, that will be a huge piece of our transition.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Mr. Janish. I'll transition to kind of a general return to learn update. Really just going to start with a couple of reminders. There haven't been significant changes. There's tweaks going on all the time, and Mr. Janish kind of touched on that. Just a couple of reminders to start off with. There really isn't any perfect plan, but I think we found a plan that works for our community. There will be inherent differences in instruction for students in person and at home, but the curriculum will be as similar as possible. So what do I mean by that? I had a conversation with a parent today via email. She was worried that kids at home were going to get different curriculum and content that kids in school are going to get, and every effort's going to be made to keep the curriculum, the content that we teach, the same. What will be different, we can't help this, is just the instruction if you're at home versus being in person in the classroom. So there will be a difference there, but we're going to make every effort to make sure that the content stays the same. We know that at some point everybody's coming back, and we need to keep everybody kind of paced as similarly as we can so that when everybody comes back, we're on the same page. In addition, there will be an opportunity for parents at the end of the second 9 weeks, at the end of the semester, to make another decision about whether or not they want to keep their students remote and move them to hybrid, or hybrid students move to remote. So whether that's at some point in the future when everybody comes back or at some transition point in the future, we need to make sure that the curriculum and the content pacing is as similar as possible. At the beginning, and Mr. Janish kind of hit on this too, there was a lot of work that went into the remote plan. At the beginning, there still is a lot of work that's going into it. I don't want to misrepresent that. But there's kind of this peak that happens where you're really doing something brand new and learning on the go. When we implement the hybrid plan, the parallel plan, I would expect to see that same kind of peak, that same learning curve, going to be pretty steep. So teacher time is going to be really focused on working through that, especially at the very beginning. So just ask for patience as teachers are working through that, from parents and the community. We want to respond and be as responsive to parents as we possibly can. may just be hard that first couple of weeks as we're getting going. And then one of the questions I've had several times here in the last week or so was just, what if? You know, November 4th is the date we're coming back. Is that set in stone? And I've told people November 4th is the return to learn date. So we need to prepare for that. We'll continue to watch things between now and then. That's something that we've talked about already. So I just want to remind the board as well as our community. So what kind of things will we watch? The two that really come to the top of the list are the health metric data, which I'll talk about in just a second. That is changing. Some are going up, some are going down actually. So those are trends that we're going to need to watch over the next couple of weeks. And we're keeping our eye also on technology, particularly the technology for K-8 students. Still don't have a ship date on those devices. So one of the things I've asked administrators to do is in the K-8, so middle school and then all 5 elementary schools, is to just start having some conversations with staff about that what if. If the technology is not here, what alternatives are out there? Let's be creative, throw everything together that we possibly can so that as we get closer and we don't have a ship date, if that's what happens, we've got some alternatives and we're not waiting until the last minute to be kind of forced into a decision. So that process is ongoing. So the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about the metric. I just want to review very quickly. I won't go through this in detail, but just want to review quickly the metric plan that initially was proposed by the SEA. We've worked on this together, and the most recent version of this has a couple of changes. We've got three modes, so to speak: full remote, hybrid, or full return. And each of those is based on 3 pieces of data. The number of cases per 100,000 residents in DeKalb County, the test positivity rate, and then the increase in new cases in residents under 20 or youth cases. So you can see there the criteria for those. We've discussed those before. So we'll go to the next slide. I won't go through these in detail, but I did draw a box around number 6 because this is the one point that I think I've really tried to reiterate to parents and staff who've asked the question. You know, that final decision is based on a variety of factors. These metrics are really going to drive that. They're going to be a key component, but they won't be the only component. We'll be looking at a variety of factors, and some of those I listed there. So here's some of the most recent data. Here are some data that I've been compiling and just kind of monitoring. This is the number of new cases per 100,000 residents in DeKalb County. And I've drawn 2 lines in there. The red line is the threshold between moderate and substantial, or in our plan, the difference between hybrid and full remote. The lower line, the yellow line, is the minimal threshold to move from hybrid to a full return, or moderate to minimal as identified by IDPH. And you can see where the trend is there with the number of cases. Well, let's go to the next slide. This is the test positivity rate. And this is just the most recent data. This is not the rolling average. This is just the most recent data provided by IDPH. And you can see it peaked there a couple of weeks ago, but you can see that it went down. It's come up a little bit. It went down last week. That most recent data just in the last week, we're hovering underneath that 8%. So you can see in one metric, and we kind of talked about this when the plan was first proposed, the data points won't always end up in the same area, full remote, hybrid, or full return. So here's a good example of 2 data points, driving us in kind of 2 different directions. But the test positivity rate has been under 8% here for the last couple of weeks. The last piece of data that I don't have a graph for is the increase in cases in youth or people under 20. That actually went down. So there wasn't an increase. It's actually a negative number. Went from about 46 to 30, kind of in that neighborhood. So that actually would put us in the minimal category or a full return. So if we were just making a decision based on the health data only, it really puts us in 3 different categories, and I think is a really good example of how difficult it would be to make that decision solely based on the health data. But I think it's still important that it needs to be an important piece of that as we move forward. So just a little bit about the data. One last thing that I've been watching, and this is morbid data, I think we'd agree, but I've been interested just to kind of see, we're still seeing test positivity go up and down, we're seeing the number of cases go up, but one of the things that I've noticed that's been different over the last several months is that the mortality rate has been on a general decline. So whether we're being more proactive, whether we're coming up with therapies, medicinal therapies to address COVID, whether we're just being more careful, whatever the case may be, and this is U.S. data. This is not DeKalb County data. This is U.S. data. You can see that mortality rate and what's happened over the last several months. So a huge peak in May, actually the end of April, I believe. And then we've been on this pretty steady decline. It peaked again at the end of July, beginning of August, but really has been on a general decline ever since. So that's really good news. So a couple of updates I do want to provide. There's been some questions about Oscar, and due to the physical space limitations at the schools, we won't be able to expand any Oscar any further than we currently have it. We still will partner with the YMCA in DeKalb in the Sycamore Park District for childcare, and we will provide transportation from school to the YMCA into the Park District for families who take advantage of that. Last thing I wanted to provide is just the fact that we are doing our best to recruit subs right now. We know that that's going to be an issue. The number of subs right now is down from where it's been in the past. With DeKalb starting up again, we know that subs are going to be at a premium. So we're going to do our best to recruit subs in our area and really try to reach out to some folks who are able to sub and maybe haven't subbed in the past to help us bridge this gap from where we are today until we can bring everybody back full time and things are a little bit safer. So you might see some things on social media or publicized to the community, just trying to recruit some more subs to help us grow that pool a little bit. Nick, is there anything you want to add there?
It's going to look different for subs as well than years past, so we're planning a training to try and get them up with technology as well, just because it's going to look different. So that's planned for next week as well.
So would the subs be doing the parallel learning model? I mean, they'll be just stepping in and needing to be able to use technology so that they could teach a lesson that is also going to be broadcast?
There's not an easy answer to that, Jim. So because of the capability we have with technology, there might be a certified teacher still on the other end. It's all going to be situational, depending on the reason the person's out. But we have capabilities we didn't have in the past, I think, of what a teacher that may not be in the classroom can do. So maybe.
So one example, and I'm going to piggyback off that. Sure. One example is that in a long-term sub, somebody we know who's going to be out for several weeks or longer, we'll prepare them to be in the classroom with students, particularly if they're not going to be able to be on the other end, as Nick mentioned. On a day-to-day basis, especially, there have been a lot of circumstances where staff is needed to be quarantined, can't be in the buildings, but is still very capable of working remotely. So in those cases, they can still be on the other end, but we'll need somebody in the classroom supervising students, once they come back. So that's a big part of what we'll need subs for. I think that's the end of my update. Is that the last slide, David? Yeah, so before we move on to policy revisions, any questions about anything that I covered?
Don't think so.
Okay. Well, we'll keep moving on. Under policy revisions, policy reviews have been kind of interesting. We started a couple of months ago. We're kind of catching up. Tonight, I'm asking that the board approve the policies as presented. I think we've got one round of policies for approval. The one that I'm going to highlight here for just a second, this will not be part of the policies that are approved tonight. Policy 4180, which Jim and Steve and I have talked about and finally gotten some feedback from our attorneys. That has to do with pandemic preparedness, so pretty important to have that updated. And as you can imagine, it was a significant update. But after reviewing it, our attorneys felt very comfortable with it as is. So I'll have that prepared for the board to review on October 27th.
So this is, these policy revisions are up for first reading. So we can just carry the whole package over
I believe so, yeah.
to the 27th?
Yeah.
Unless someone wants to approve what we have out there now. I'll tell you from our meetings, the vast majority of changes to this policy packet were due to changes in Title IX. And so there were a lot of mandatory changes that had to be made. It wasn't like we had a lot of choice in terms of where to go. Another driving force behind this packet was the pandemic and pandemic preparedness and the governor's disaster orders. So between those three, the big three there, we didn't have a whole lot of choice. So we'll just continue this until the next board meeting, and we'll have the second reading and vote at that time.
That's part of the superintendent's update is an enrollment update. So every year for many years, the State Board of Education has required schools to collect and report what they call sixth day enrollment. As it sounds, it's the enrollment in schools on the sixth day of attendance. It's been a little challenging this year because students across the state aren't necessarily physically in attendance, but they are in attendance virtually. Because it's happened every year on the sixth day, it's become a great data point to monitor trends in enrollment over the years. Unfortunately, this year our enrollment is down about 216 students when compared to last year. I've got a chart here on the next slide that you'll see in just a second. The primary change, the decrease, is in grades K through 5. We saw 175 students decrease, and that was kind of spread out, not quite evenly, but spread out amongst the 5 elementary schools. The decrease in enrollment at the middle school and the high school was much smaller, 18 at the middle school and 23 at the high school. Enrollment in Sycamore has been stable for several years. I think it's very likely that the decrease in enrollment was likely a result of COVID-19, district moving to a remote learning plan. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when we move back to a hybrid on November 4th. And then, of course, what happens eventually when we move to phase 5 or continue to bring students back. So maybe those students return. Some of those obviously have moved out of the area. Some of them have maybe gone to private schools or to homeschooling. So the next slide has a chart. Not easy to see. Numbers are small, but you can see there how the enrollment turned out for this school year, and then the rows at the bottom in pink, that's the enrollment data from last year.
And the numbers at South Prairie were so significantly higher. Do we have any reasoning for that?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Again, you could see that across all K-5, but you're right, South Prairie just happened to be a little larger.
It's really kind of stuck out.
Kind of a pocket there in South Prairie. Hard to tell.
Yeah.
I would have expected it to be much more in line with the other 4
Right.
elementary schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Say even more interesting than that is it's almost all the boys.
Yeah.
It might be early childhood numbers.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that.
And there was some programming that moved from South Prairie to another building,
Gotcha.
a little bit.
Any questions about enrollment, 6th-day enrollment?
I would say your assessment about it being COVID-related would jive with what I've heard from people in the community a lot that either decided to just do homeschool for their own continuity's sake or looked at other alternative private programs. So that doesn't surprise me.
So ultimately, how does that impact our budget? Are we still receiving funding based on numbers?
No.
So it has really no impact on the funding we'll receive?
It might in the whole scheme of things with the evidence-based funding, but I wouldn't know that impact off the top of my head.
Because we don't really know how they put together evidence-based
Yeah.
funding. Okay. That'll be interesting to see. I hope it does not affect us negatively.
There's a hold harmless provision in EBF, which is a great part of the legislation. But EBF is still based on being properly, appropriately funded by the state. So,
Right.
And I think there are a couple things that are going to drive that here, one happening here in the next month or so. So, yeah, hopefully if EBF model is funded appropriately, the hold harmless would kick in, but we'll have to watch that carefully. Any other questions about enrollment?
Steve, just a general question. It looks like through the elementary schools, we're about down 10% year over year based upon the 6-day enrollment. Any guesses on where we'll be once we go to the parallel hybrid plan in terms of possible students back or them staying remote? Or
You know, that's a really good question. We've been watching the numbers, the designation numbers come in over the last week or so. You know, families opting to move from hybrid to remote or remote to hybrid. As Mr. Janish referenced earlier, the assumption was that we would see more students move from remote to hybrid. Is that an indication of families who've maybe homeschooled their kids or moved them to a different learning environment, bringing them back? That's a really good question. I would speculate that we would see some of those numbers start to rise across all 5 elementary schools, particularly as we start to move back to hybrid, but you never know. So that's a really good question. That's something that we'll have to watch here over the next couple of months.
So I guess my thinking is that let's suppose that we're down 10% across the district, that's a static figure, and then let's say 20% decide to stay remote. So in theory, we'd have 30% more room in the classroom. I'm assuming that's something you're going to consider as we look toward the future with getting back in the classroom once things calm down.
Yeah, you know, the ultimate goal is to bring everybody back at some point. You know, that depends on a lot of other factors, but physical space is absolutely one of them. Can we get students in classrooms safely and space them out appropriately? The other trick really is to monitor how enrollment changes at not only each elementary school, let's say, but also each grade level. You know, we had a meeting with the administrators today, and one of the issues that we're starting to see already is that the number of students and their families who are opting, let's say, to move from remote to hybrid is not spread evenly across the district, and it's not spread evenly across grade levels. So that's going to depend on where those decisions end up and where we have physical space. But absolutely, that's one of the things that we'll continue to monitor is what does enrollment look like, what does physical space look like, what are the safety requirements and things like that to look to a point in the future where we might be able to bring everybody back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Okay, thank you.
That's all I've got.
Anything else? Okay, then we'll move on to open discussion, issues, observations, questions. Feel somewhat discussed out after having the workshop a week ago. Quite a lot of discussion went on there.
I guess I'll ask for futility's sake, but I assume there still hasn't been any movement in our ability to get out of our current Chromebook contract to try and acquire devices where they may be available right now.
No, to Roxanne's credit, she's done a phenomenal job keeping in touch with our sales rep from the company that we've purchased them from. She gets contacts all the time, and from time to time reaches out to other people or possible vendors who say, "I've got all the Chromebooks you need right here in our warehouse," and we pick up the phone and have a conversation, and she finds out pretty quick, well, they don't have them yet either. They're just trying to get us to switch, and then we end up waiting for them. From a legal perspective, and we have not run this by lawyers in detail, but the purchase agreement is pretty solid. We don't see any way to get out of that. But the other issue is that even if we got out of it, I'm not sure that we've identified another vendor who could get those devices to us any sooner, because that backlog is not only with our vendor, all vendors, but it's not just Lenovo devices which you'd purchased. It's Lenovo, it's HP, it's Dell, it's you name it. So good question, but no movement there, no.
Other issues for discussion, questions, observations? Future agenda items? Is there a motion to go into executive session for the consideration of matters related to the appointment, employment, or dismissal of personnel and imminent litigation?
So moved.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Jacobson, so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Jones?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yep.
Wren?
Yes.
Shiloh?
Yes.
Davy?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Dombeck?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Right. Is there a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, roll call?
Ren,
Yes.
Shiloh,
Yes.
Davy,
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Dombeck,
Yes.
motion carried.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
And there we go.
Why is everybody afraid tonight?
Big five.
Pretty.